You know, one thing I always found strange is how many anime fans are so homophobic. For years in the 90s and 2000s, one of the main selling points for anime in the West was how it showed you the sort of things you couldn't find on Western TV, such as gay people. How many shows featured a martial artist who could switch from a boy to a girl when doused by water? How many anime featured women plucking swords from the breasts of their roommates in order to revolutionize the world? How many shows featured a scene where an alien landlord detonates the core of a planet, one that is set to go off in a mere 5 minutes, only for 10 half-hour episodes to pass before the planet finally does explode? These are the kinds of things you couldn't get anywhere else.
This ain't no Mickey Mouse. This ain't no Looney Tunes. This is anime.
The fact that anime pulled in such a broad queer audience should be a surprise to absolutely no one.
I have to go to bed.
With me?
No, I think you have your own room that they gave you, I mean.
If you loved Ranma 1/2 as a kid, for example, and you just really love that gender-bending component of it, there is a non-zero probability that you are no longer identifying with the gender you were assigned at birth. Every queer anime fan has that one show, the one that they just liked a lot. The one they adored just because it was neat, and they couldn't really pinpoint that exact reason why they liked it so much, until years later they're sitting down and they go, oh, that's why.
1, 2,
This one's going
1,
out
2,
to
3,
all
4.
the ladies.
I am Sailor Moon, champion of justice.
Sailor Moon is one such show like that, and it's one that faced a ton of controversy when it first came out in the West. Tons of censorship, tons of conflicts in terms of time slots. It was a show that garnered popularity slowly until it debuted on Toonami, where a ton of us, myself included, were first introduced to Usagi and her friends. Of course, by the time it did come to Western shores, all the homoerotic elements were brushed away, scrubbed off, censored, to allow parents to accept the show as opposed to protest it or criticize it. Of course, what these censors didn't really take into account were that the kids watching the show had access to the internet.
Every day, America Online is making it a little easier for people to live, work, and play.
This was around the time the internet first blew up in popularity and impacted the way we experienced the media we consumed. So a ton of kids, myself very much included, went online to see what kind of things the American broadcasting networks wanted to keep away from our impressionable young minds, finding, of course, tons of material cut from Western releases.
But the look in my cousin's eyes was so intense, so full of knowledge greater than I could imagine, that I was even more afraid. I knew if I stopped running now, there'd be no escape.
Deke and later Cloverway spent a ton of time making the show more acceptable for Western audiences. In doing so, however, they introduced a lot of Western anime fans to the concept of cultural differences.
But he's just the right height for me, and we both love to ride motorcycles, and... But he's just the right height for me, and we both love to ride motorcycles.
It's redundant to just say Sailor Moon featured a few gay characters. It obviously did. The question is what role these characters played in the show's writing and plot, as well as what impact these characters had on the audience watching it, especially those who grew up with the show in its censored format and would later rediscover the show in its uncensored original content. Season 1 villains Zoisite and Kunzite are a same-sex couple. Several seasons later, Fisheye would be another gay villain, though this time was also presented as more femme. Both Zoisite and Fisheye were changed into women in the Deke and Cloverway dubs of Sailor Moon.
Warriors, not losers.
Buzz off, Zoisite. You called Majesty?
But even as kids, most people could see through the censorship. What was most remarkable, though, was Sailor Uranus and Sailor Neptune, a queer couple from the original anime who were infamously changed to cousins in the Cloverway dub. This is despite the dub not changing any of the visuals accompanying said characters, which led to some interesting implications. Ultimately, the entire final season of Sailor Moon didn't even get dubbed, in part due to how many things would need to be changed to satisfy the demands of censors. Seiya and the rest of the Sailor Starlights are alien women who disguise themselves as men, either through costumes, as in the manga, or by converting their genders, as in the anime, in order to find their princess. Seiya ends up romancing Usagi, While Usagi doesn't realize that Seiya is a girl when they first meet, she eventually does find out, and while the Starlight's revealed identities cause controversy, the fact that they're girls is never a concern for Usagi, almost as if gender is secondary of a concern for them. Is gender a factor in terms of Sailor Moon and the Sailor Guardians' love life? Or is their attraction more based on emotional need, on connection, on common interests, potentially? How does this impact every single Magical Girl series to follow Sailor Moon, as well as the audience viewing it? I don't know if we'll get all the answers to that question, but I do know we can try our best. Now, one thing that you do get normalized when watching Sailor Moon growing up is pan-romantic affection. The idea that love is something that's not defined by gender or any boundary of that nature, but rather by the connection of two souls linked, regardless of adversity, difference, etc. In a sense, that love conquers all. Love knows no bounds. Love in Sailor Moon is often presented as this pure thing, this force, this thing that allows you to have pure great dreams. The villains in Sailor Moon often target civilians. The character introduced each episode, so a new monster of the week targets the new guest star of the week, essentially, and targets them based on their pure dreams, their pure sense of love, their childlike abandon for the world. Something that they want, something that they need, and that need drives them to do great things. Love in Sailor Moon is seen as an elevating force, one that can make someone's dreams become potentially filled with diamonds that can revolutionize existence.
I need to see if there's a talisman inside that girl. Take her heart so we can find out.
We see a ton of these characters, like people who are interested in horses, people who are animators who look remarkably like Rebecca Sugar, even the Sailor Scouts themselves, or Sailor Guardians, or Sailor Senshi. I'm going to use these terms interchangeably throughout the video, just deal with it. Romance is seen as a pathway to purity. The only thing is, there are of course a few examples in Sailor Moon where love can corrupt. But they are heavily outweighed by the countless examples of how love is seen as a positive force for growth. The only unhealthy romances in Sailor Moon are that of Queen Beryl and Prince Diamond. Beryl, in the manga, and to an extent the anime, has an unhealthy obsession with Endymion, while Diamond's affections are for the Neo-Queen Serenity. Both of these obsessive crushes are projected onto the modern-day incarnations of these characters, Mamoru and Usagi, respectively, and both are forced into non-consenting relationships with the two. Beryl mind controls Mamoru and forces him to dress up as Endymion, while Prince Diamond kidnaps Usagi and forcibly dresses her up as her future incarnation. In fact, Beryl, in particular, fights an entire war to destroy the Moon Kingdom in order to destroy what she perceives as a threat to her pursuit of the Prince Endymion. In contrast to that toxic love, we are also shown great examples of love, even from the bad guys. Zoisite and Kunzite, though they are of course villains who do a lot of things wrong, their love is never deemed as bad. In fact, when Zoisite eventually is killed off, we see him die in a way that's beautiful, in a way to symbolize the purity of his love with Kunzite. It's one last favor Kunzite gives his lover before he passes on. And of course the Amazon trio, among which is Fisheye, are treated as kind of punch clock villains who clock in and clock out of their duties like it's a job. And their affections are treated as legitimate as any other character's affections in the show. Even their interpersonal friendship is treated as just as valid as the Sailor Senshi's friendships with each other. Of course, not every romance is a good thing. It's very debatable. There's a few romances in Sailor Moon that are a little iffy, like for example Nephrite and Naru's relationship. Nephrite is of course one of the 4 generals that works in the Queen Beryl in the Dark Kingdom, and Naru is Usagi's friend slash classmate slash a 14-year-old girl. Naru clearly has affections for Nephrite and is attracted to him. Nephrite kind of uses that affection as a tool to manipulate Naru for the longest time, until essentially the last episode he shows up in, where he dies at the Of course, the question becomes, is Nephrite's feelings more like a softening of affection and kind of seeing her as a kind person who deserves to be protected, maybe a pet?
But she's more like a pet to me.
A pet? Or is this true, genuine love, either familial love, a love of respect, or something else? The problem with the last category is that Naru is again a 14-year-old girl, and Nephrite is a little bit older than that, so it's a little weird if we consider that angle. I like to think of it more as like him softening on humanity, but shippers have a different perspective on that matter. And of course there's Luna, who is a cat, who in the S movie falls in love with a scientist. At the same time, she is dating Artemis, another cat. This is weird. Luna becomes a human to have a few minutes with her love, who is a scientist. This is all very strange, but that's the plot of the S movie for you. It's okay. It's a good movie, but that's kind of weird. And of course, the boundaries restricting this romance from ever happening are discussed. It's just a little weird at times. But again, this ties in with the theme that love cannot be stopped. Love is an eternal thing. Love is without limitation. Still, when it comes to the Sailor Guardians themselves, love is always seen as the peak. It is the goal that you want to achieve, to be loved and to be accepted. That is something that is presented as a highest good in Sailor Moon. And all of the Sailor soldiers have this same perspective, to different extents. Rei is an exception, we'll get to that later. Despite all the girls' faults at times and their own shortcomings, their love is never seen as a shortcoming. It's never presented as something bad that has to be avoided. Say for maybe perhaps Venus, who is a helpless romantic at times and always tries to get people to be with each other. And the fault there is that her enthusiasm for love and people starting relationships sometimes gets the better of her, and she doesn't always think things through. But this is again presented as a quirky fault, not a serious fault.
Say, Mina, who is the guy on the bike?
Oh, you mean Jack Torishima. Well, he's a roadie for a new rock band.
And again, the fault there isn't that she feels love and affection, it's that she's so enthusiastic to see it spark that she doesn't always take into consideration a few things. Which is, you know, that's a human flaw, and that fits with her character, and it's nice, and it's funny, and leads to some cool, fun bits, and some interesting subplots. So, love knows no bounds. Something we see frequently in other shoujo anime, heralded for their queer rep, is that love is boundless. Cardcaptor Sakura, for example, often emphasized the concept that anyone could have loved anyone.
In an interview after the completion of the manga, Clamp's head writer, Okawa, basically confirms that she deliberately wrote Sakura that way. I wanted a story with a protagonist who had an open mind towards different family structures, different kinds of love, and different perspectives from society. For example, when she found out that Shaoran was in love with Yukito, she didn't look at him strangely. She did consider him a rival, but she didn't act as though it was weird. In the same interview, Okawa also explained that the reason Sakura didn't fall in love with Tomio isn't because they're both girls, and that Sakura would have fallen in love with Shaoran no matter what, regardless of gender, because of the kind of person he was.
Several characters develop crushes on both boys and girls. To Clamp, love knows no bounds, something many Cardcaptor Sakura fans probably wish wasn't the case, given that Clamp also feels that age gaps are on the table. Why? Clamp, really? Why? Why? We also know that several people who worked on Sailor Moon would go on to make other LGBTQA-friendly anime themselves. Ryota Yamaguchi, the series head writer for Sailor Stars, would work also on Ranma 1/2, specifically the later anime-only stories, the movies, and OVAs. Takuya Igarashi, who also directed episodes of Sailor Stars, worked on Ouran High School Host Club, which features gender nonconforming icon Haruhi.
Listen, Senpai, I don't really care whether you guys recognize me as a boy or a girl. In my opinion, it's more important for a person to be recognized for who they are rather than for what sex they are.
And then there's Kunihiko Ikuhara, the primary director for 3 of Sailor Moon's 5 seasons, who took some rejected ideas for a story involving Sailor Uranus and Neptune and transformed it into the overflowing homoerotic existential saga, Revolutionary Girl Utena. And Yamaguchi did some writing for the series as well, so there is some crossover appeal there. Now, all that is great, but what does this have to do with Sailor Moon as a series? I mean, Ikuhara working on Sailor Moon, that's great. 3 seasons, that's good. He worked in the gayest one, S, cool. That doesn't mean Usagi is gay or anything. Of course, no. The staff doesn't affect it. The plot and characters do, and the themes, and the focus, and the love relationships do. This is just establishing a foundation that I'm working upon so we can build to the real crux of the argument, which is going to start right now. You ready? Good. Here comes the part where I talk about each of the Sailor Guardians and figure out who the gayest of them all is. And, spoiler alert, it is Uranus.
Hey, Bunhead. Next time, you and me should do some racing.
Yeah!
Obviously, the Outer Guardians are pretty queer. Come the end of the series, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto form a polycule of sorts and raise Hotaru. Hotaru has 3 moms now, not counting her biological one. That's the queer family structure one can only hope to see in society. This is the future liberals want. Of course, Uranus and Neptune are both extremely queer and extremely flirty. Michiru flirts with both men and women.
Oh, they're starting the waltz. Mamoru, would you be my partner for this dance?
No, wait! Momo's going to dance with me!
All right. How about you and I dance together, Bunhead?
Oh, that'd be great!
In the manga, she even manages to lure in Mamoru, and we even see her flirt with Seiya a little bit while she's in her male form. But Haruka makes a habit of seducing just about half of the women she meets, including almost every single Sailor Guardian. Venus, Jupiter, Mars, and especially Sailor Moon herself just can't help themselves around her.
Haruka seems like a really good leader.
She's so lucky. I'm going next.
Hold on. We should arm wrestle to see who goes next.
How about we just do a round of rock, paper, scissors? Come on, girls.
Or them? That's the other thing worth discussing about Haruka. Despite Sailor Uranus's gender never really coming up in terms of the anime outside of her initial introduction, where people say, hey, you know she's a girl, right? In the manga, there's a very different approach taken. Haruka defies gender.
Uranus is not one gender or the other, she is both. As a Sailor Guardian, she possesses the strength of both a man and a woman.
Many people who are non-binary identify with Uranus. Look, there's no denying it. Your gaydar goes off the moment you see Uranus in any of the shots in the show.
That was 6 months ago. I should have known this would happen.
And as for Pluto, well, Pluto's clearly ace. At no point does Pluto ever exhibit any interest in any romance whatsoever. She is clearly part of the polycule that is the outer senshi, but at the same time, she's never presented as having any romantic interest with anyone in the Sailor Guardians. She's also an ageless being outside of time and space, so that may have something to do with it. I feel like Arrow Ace is a good description for Pluto because she seems to exist beyond affection, at least beyond romantic affection. But familial and intimate affection is deeply ingrained in Pluto because she clearly cares for her pseudo family and she clearly treats Chibiusa like a daughter. Hotaru, well, she's a very young girl, and the only person she's shown to form any relationship with outside of her 3 moms is Chibiusa. Their friendship can be read as puppy love by some fans, provided they don't look at how much older Chibiusa is than Hotaru. Regardless, outside of fan-shipping material, there's really no indication of Sailor Saturn's romantic affections of any kind in any canon material, and I feel it might be a little presumptuous to assume in any direction where her future preferences may lie. When we get to the Inner Guardians, this is where things get more interesting. Obviously, all of them have been in relationships at some point in the show with boys. Usagi and Mamoru are one of the key ships in the show. There are at least 2 separate occasions where Ami has a crush on a guy. One of these subplots involves Ami eating a burger in one of the most iconic shots of the show, which is just so pure and lovely. It's a great little shot. I love it. Both Minako and Makoto, Venus and Jupiter, have subplots where a guy plays a key role in their development as characters before the show even starts. So again, that's right there. Venus has several subplots throughout the show where she's with other guys. There's even one subplot in Super S where she 2 times the Amazon trio with each other.
All right. I will no longer hide the way I truly feel.
So which is it?
I like both of you.
What?
And then there's Rei.
Handsome or not, I can't believe Mako would go chasing after another woman.
Isn't this yours, Rei?
Wait, actually, hold on. This is where things get a little more complicated. Depending on whether or not you read the manga or watched the anime, Rei's preferences become very different. In the manga, it is explicitly clear that Rei has no interest in anyone. Not male, not female, no one. She is explicitly shown to be completely divested from romantic affection. Of course, in the anime, she flirts with Mamoru, she has dates. There's those who read into her having a relationship with Usagi, potentially because of their tsundere dynamic, but Rei in the manga explicitly says she has no interest in dating anyone. By contrast, Rei in the anime gets into relationship hijinks all the time. She even collects lesbian magazines. Wait, hang on a second. She also has some flirty exchanges with Haruka, because of course she did. Lots of people ship her with the other Sailor Guardians, especially Usagi. So it's kind of interesting. Does that make Rei bi in the anime but ace in the manga? Sure, why not?
She's pretty fabulous, huh? Why do you want to go to her house,
Oh, well, I'm just thinking she'd like her scarf back.
Jupiter is another one who has a primarily boy-centric love life, but has on occasion been interested in people of her gender. I mean, she also has a crush on Haruka. That's canon. But I mean, everyone has a crush on Haruka, right? Haruka's special ability must be that they make people gayer just by proximity.
And not to get too gossipy, but her date is a woman. Did Mako suddenly change her orientation? That doesn't matter. But wait, there's more. Her date is Haruka. Oh, well, in that case, I can't really blame her.
There's also a lot of evidence to suggest that Mako might also have a crush on Ami, given their adorable dancing scene together, and that time Mako got flashed by Ami and didn't seem to mind all that much. But it's undetermined if Ami reciprocates those feelings. She does have feelings for boys, we see, but that doesn't seem grounded in physical attraction at all. It simply is just a thing she feels. She doesn't seem to care about physical traits in terms of romance, but rather focuses entirely on intellect, on the brain, on the soul, on the spirit. Therefore, it's probable that she might be demisexual, only forming real attraction if she feels they have a good relationship beforehand. Demisexuality is a whole other thing, but I think she might be somewhere on the ace spectrum. That means it's probably good news for Jupiter, because, you know, there's a chance. She has a shot. Venus I've avoided bringing up because I feel she is arguably the most boy crazy. Again, she also fangirls over the Starlights, like Ami, but is under the impression they're both boys. And unlike Ami and Usagi, she doesn't have too many interactions with them after the reveal that suggests she's still crushing on Yaten, so she might be the token straight friend.
Her date is Haruka! Oh, well, in that case, I can't really blame her.
Until you read the manga and see that there are some affectionate ways she interacts with her friends. Yeah, there's no way anyone in this friend group is heterosexual. But they got nothing on Usagi. Usagi's a disaster bisexual, like, in every sense of the word. Let's ignore the fact that she has a canonical relationship with Mamoru, a boy, Haruka, whose gender is undetermined as of yet, and Seiya, who most likely is female but does transition into male back and forth throughout stars in the anime. So, already right there, few different genders she's attracted to. Let's ignore the fact also that in Crystal in the manga, every time she meets a new friend, she blushes, gets embarrassed, and talks about how pretty the other girls are. Let's ignore all of that, because Usagi's power comes from love, comes from affection, comes from her eternal devotion to everyone. Her love is what powers her. It gives her enough power to blow up planets. Yes, the Silver Crystal personifies that, but she is essentially a soldier of love, of light, of purity. It all comes from the heart. So this screams bi or pan to me. Either way, it's in that same ballpark. I've actually written an entire article, at least once, regarding this very topic. I lay out my ideas there in more detail. So yes, most of the characters do not conform to heterosexual standards, but what does it matter? So what? In the end, who cares, right? Well, let's talk about that for a second. To put it simply, Sailor Moon proved to be a massively, highly influential work. I recently did a live reaction to Doug Walker's Sailor Moon review, where it was a ton of fun for the review, and I recommend you watch it even though the review itself was painful to sit through. And it was demonetized almost immediately because we couldn't stop swearing our heads off. Anyway, a common consensus between my guests and my audience was that if they were gay, bi, trans, etc., Sailor Moon provided a key component to their development. By watching Sailor Moon, they were able to maybe piece together something about their own identity, or at the very least, it was a warning sign that they weren't all cis or weren't all straight. I can't speak for individual experiences. Art is both a public and private experience, one of which you have to kind of experience for yourself. So I can't tell you what your experiences are or aren't. What I can say is that many people have tended to find Sailor Moon to be a very rewarding work to experience, especially if they grew up, maybe closeted, maybe discovering their own identity. I can't explain why queer people gravitate towards Sailor Moon both in the past and currently, but I can say that queer people tend to gravitate towards each other under normal circumstances. How many friend groups do you know where everyone happened to come out later on in life? Weren't out when they first met, but they all turned out to be gay or trans or bi, etc. later on, or ace later on in life. This is because people gravitate towards those with similar life experiences, and lots of queer people have similar life experiences, or interests, what have you. Maybe they're the outsiders, maybe they're the outcasts, maybe they don't fit in with everyone else. And Sailor Moon's group of friends in the show, I think, is very identifiable to a group like that. All of them are outsiders in one regard or the other who don't fit into society, but they are accepted and loved for who they are by their friends. This is something I think that a lot of queer people growing up, especially young girls or teenagers, might connect to. And because of that, they might continue to emotionally have it in a place of love in their hearts for years to come. There's a reason why Sailor Moon is a show people come back to years later, while other anime from their childhood they do not. Because the sense of intimacy and continued familiarity is something that is comforting to them even years later. And something that is still well written years later, because the characters are all dynamic and interesting. And even if Usagi and friends aren't queer, which I don't think so because I just made a whole video describing why they are queer, they are characters that queer audiences can relate to and empathize with. And even to an extent apply their life experiences to them. And in many senses of the word, that's just as good, or at least just as important as them being explicitly queer. Because what matters is if you can connect to the characters, you can connect to the world, and you can connect to the story, coming back time and time again, because it means something to you. Media like this creates a safe haven through which an audience can thrive. It is something that you can endure and experience and love, which makes it powerful, which makes it something you can connect to and come back to. This is all very important for the longevity of media that we watch. And for those who want to create media, to create characters who are well-rounded, well-developed, and interesting is a key component of powerful storytelling. And one of the reasons why Sailor Moon, despite its flaws, despite its sometimes fluffy plot, despite many episodes of filler, remains relevant to this very day. For all its faults, Sailor Moon is a show that continues to have longevity. It continually welcomes its audience in. Either that or Haruka made everyone gay just by watching her on screen. I mean, look, it's apparently she could do that. Apparently she has that power, I guess.